Okay, so good afternoon, everybody. My name is Dr. Lade Smith, and I'm a consultant psychiatrist and visiting senior lecturer at the South London and Wolsey NHS Foundation Trust and the Institute of Psychiatry, Psychology and Neuroscience. And most importantly, probably for this webinar, I'm also one of two joint presidential leads for race and equality at the Royal College of Psychiatrists. And it gives me enormous pleasure to be chairing the panel this afternoon. So this afternoon, we are going to be talking to three very interesting people, all of whom are psychiatrists. They're very prominent and going to be they're very influential in their work. And they happen to all have something in common in that they are all Black psychiatrists. And we often hear discussion about, Black doctors, Black mental health, Black psychiatrists, etc. And it's usually fairly negative. There aren't enough Black psychiatrists. We don't really see them. They're not very prominent. There are just one or two people who are very prominent, and so on and so forth. What we thought was that it would be really good to hear from some psychiatrists who are actually doing incredible things who you may not have heard of just because you haven't worked with them. And it's to really help you to hopefully feel a bit inspired, whoever you are and whatever your background is, actually be inspired and interested and enthused by some of their stories. Okay, so just to remind you, we have a Q&A. If you want to put your questions, if you've got any questions you want to put, you want to put to our panelists, do put them in the Q&A. You might have, some comments you want to make, then that's sensible that they can go in the chat. What we're going to do is we're going to hear from each of our three speakers. We'll have about, going to tell us a little about their lives. We've got three questions for them. Then what we're going to do is having, each of them is going to speak to those three questions. And then what we'll do is that for the last kind of half an hour, 20 minutes or so, we'll have a discussion between ourselves and with you, and hopefully you'll have some questions and comments that you would like to be raised. So the three questions are: what has been your proudest achievement so far? Number two, as a Black psychiatrist, what barriers have you come across, and do you have any advice for people starting out on their journey? And finally, who has been the biggest influence in your life and why? How have they shaped your journey so far? As you can see, those questions could be for anybody, but I think they're particularly going to be pertinent and interesting for our three panelists today. So without further ado, I'm going to introduce our very first panelist. And our very first panelist is actually our youngest panelist. I think David and Deji would allow me to say that. And he is Olufemi Talabi Femi. He's a core psychiatric trainee. He's a CT3, and he works in the East of England Deanery. He's absolutely passionate about older people, transcultural psychiatry, Afrobeat music. And also, interestingly, he's a medical entrepreneur, and he's actually a venture capitalist, and he's very interested in innovation in healthcare. So Femi, interestingly, has a side gig, essentially. And what he does is that he focuses on digital. He's got a digital health company, and they focus on digital companies that are trying to solve public health challenges and improve health outcomes in sub-Saharan Africa. It's called Itaju Health. So this is really interesting. And I think increasingly we know that in order for, particularly our juniors to stay in psychiatry, it may well be that we're going to see much more of kind of people doing portfolio careers. And Femi is starting young. Okay, so I'm going to start with Femi. Our second speaker is Deji Ayamrinde, and then our final speaker is David Ndegwa, and I'll introduce them after we've spoken to Femi for a little bit. So Femi, a very, very warm welcome.
Thank you so much, Dr. Smith, for that lovely introduction.
Okay.
I'm actually excited to be here today. Yeah.
Yeah, well, we're very excited to have you. So Femi, to the first question, actually, and tell us about yourself and what you've done. But so far, what has been your proudest achievement?
Oh, thank you for that. So I think My proudest achievement so far has actually been affiliated with the college because I'm someone that is quite interested in social justice. I'm someone that you'd say is very woke. And I'm proud of what the college is doing in that regard. So it's a like each time I sort of like come for college events, even during the exams, I feel proud to be associated with the Royal College of Psychiatrists. So I would say that that's definitely like important. Then I think I'm also like proud to be training as a psychiatrist because there was a time I really thought about what to do going forward in terms of my career. And then it was a choice between pediatrics and psychiatry. But then psychiatry won over. And I think it's the best decision I've made so far in my medical career. Then, of course, I'm proud of what we've done in Itoju Health because working as a venture capitalist demands a special kind of skill that is different from being a clinician. But I sort of like challenged myself, went for some trainings, and we've made a lot of progress. So I'm actually proud, or I'm very proud about that too. So those are the three things that are really dear to me and I'm proud about.
Oh, that's fantastic. Actually, I'm very pleased to hear that you're really proud of being a psychiatrist, actually. I mean, I am too, as it happens. Could you tell us a little bit more about Itoju Health? I mean, what does it mean? So if someone like me, I'm very, very old, right? I am.
Yeah.
And, I hear the term venture capitalist and I think, oh, isn't that when people come along and basically strip the assets of a company and then, disappear having made lots of money, leaving the company stripped dry? What is it? What does it mean exactly? What do you do?
Yeah, so basically what we do is that we just help digital health companies scale really. So we sort of like empower them to do more for the public, for everybody. So that's like the summary of what we do. And we believe that venture capital is not just about coming to a company and stripping them of assets. You can actually like come to a company, like fund them, and then with funding, they can become like really big organizations and really deliver a lot of value. And how did my journey start? I'm Nigerian and I qualified from Nigeria. So I worked in Nigeria for a bit, and there's a startup in Nigeria called Life Bank. So basically what they do is that they are trying to solve the problem with the blood transfusion system in Nigeria. So there was a day I was working in a clinic and then we needed blood urgently, and for some reason we had logistical issues. We called these guys and they were able to like innovate, and the blood got to us, and we're able to save a life. And I mean, to the company, it's maybe just business, but to us and to the family of that patient, it's made like a whole lot of difference.
Yeah.
So like, when you look at like cases like that, so basically what we are just doing is just saying that we want to use finance as a force for good. And we want what we do to be a net positive to society. And that's what we've been doing. And what does Itoju means? Itoju means care. And we are really
Right.
focused on like older people, making their lives easier. And we are like, there are many of our portfolio companies that are doing things in that space, and we've really improved things, so to say. And of course, we know that in healthcare, like definitely a lot of funding is needed, and sometimes the government alone cannot do it. So there's a way to bring in private capital, improve things, and at the same time to deliver value to everybody. Yeah.
Okay. All right. Well, I'm glad it's you and not some other venture capitalists then. So, as a Black psychiatrist, what barriers have you come across? And do you have any advice for people starting out on their journey?
Yes. So, as regarding the barriers, I think the first barrier I had was actually adjusting to the healthcare system here because the NHS is slightly different. The patient profile is different, and coming from a majorly black country to a country where I'm like in a minority, I also had to like mentally adjust and sort of like prepare myself. So, and I
Mm.
think that was like a very important like to get over. Then I also think that getting into training was also demanded like special attention because I had to like do the exams and everything. And of course, I'm still in training and my journey is still ongoing. But if I'm going to like advise anyone, I would just tell them to go for it. And I think as a Black psychiatrist, the world needs more people like us, even like for Black patients, even for everybody, because I think we have like we understand. I don't want to understand things better, but I feel that if you have experienced racism in your day-to-day life, then you can understand the impact it would have on the patient's mental health, and you can maybe like connect to patients on a deeper level. Then I also feel that there's also the part for representation, the fact that even when, say, somebody comes to see you in the clinic and they say that you look like them, you speak like them, I mean, there's a feeling that I can become this, I can do this, I can become someone better. So I think so I think those are some of the things. And I remember, like, there was a time that I was preparing for primaries in Nigeria, and I was reading Sims. And I remember the first day I got the book and I saw that it was actually like a Nigerian name. I was so surprised. And, I was influenced by the quality of that book, but also by the representation. It meant a lot to me. And then it actually like inspired me to even do more and to like set higher goals for myself.
Okay. All right. Thank you very much indeed. I mean, it's interesting what you say about, perhaps being discriminated against helps to understand patients, the patient's journey perhaps a bit better. And that's not just Black patients, of course, that will be any patient, because many of our patients, because they've got mental illness, have been discriminated against, because of all the stigma, etc., because of that. Okay. So who's been the biggest influence on your life and why? How have they shaped your journey so far?
This is a very difficult question because I wouldn't say there's someone that has been.
Yeah, you've got to be careful because your mum and dad are listening, Femi.
So, I mean, I'm going to name a couple of people because I feel that each of them have like contributed a part of themselves and they've made me into like a better person, a better doctor. And they've also like taught and trained me. So of course we have someone on the panel, which is Dr. Ayorinde, who is like a mentor to me. We speak all the time and I've really learned a lot from him. And it's like, I think just like having him there, like is like a shoulder to lean on. He's almost like a big brother, and it's been really beneficial. Then I also want to say thanks to Dr. Sule, because Dr. Sule, like, as you know, is a consultant psychiatrist, but he also does hip hop psych, and is really interested in social justice issues. And he's someone that like gets it, I would say. I'm a younger person, so it's someone that I can actually like maybe like like message, talk to, and he understands things. Let me just put it like that. So Dr. Sule is also someone. Then also, of course, my mom. My mom is a university lecturer, but she's also like an entrepreneur, and she has managed to like combine both passions, and she's doing well in both regards. And I would say that she gave me my like first break, and it's really nice to just learn from her. And of course, you, Dr. Smith, because I remember when
because I'm interviewing you. I didn't
no,
pay
no,
him,
not
by the way.
no, not really, actually, because like I'm preparing for the CASC exam, so there's this mostly CASC, and you wrote a foreword to the book, and like it was nice to actually just listen to your like just read about your experience. I like the way you talked about hope, like not just giving up and saying, oh, differential attainment, you can't do this or you can't do that. And you inspire me, even though like it's from a distance, but you do inspire me. So, and there are many other people that I could just go on and on and on, but I just want to say that I don't have like a single like biggest influence, but I try to pick something up from people I come in contact with.
Okay, that's absolutely lovely. I think we'll end on that high note of me being inspiring. I like that. Okay, so Femi, thank you very much indeed. I'm going to move on to our next speaker, who is Dr. Deji Ayomrinde, and I've known Deji for a long, long time. And when we first met, I was 5 and he was about 30. That's why he's got grey hair than me. Truth is, actually, Deji, I think I am older than you. That is the truth of it. But there we go. Deji Ayomrinde is an associate professor of psychiatry at Queen's University in Kingston, Ontario, in Canada. However, I know him because he worked and did his postgraduate training at the Bethlem and Maudsley Hospitals in London. He actually trained in both general adult and addiction psychiatry. He worked as a consultant at the Maudsley for a long time and was honorary senior lecturer at the Institute of Psychiatry, Psychology and Neuroscience. And he's got a real interest in youth mental health, cannabis and psychosis, metabolic syndrome, novice transition. He's now is very interested in multinational teams and cultural mental health and the history of psychiatry. And Deji actually used to run this boxing, kind of boxing program, and it was a way of getting patients to, start to recover and think about their health in a different kind of way. It's very creative, and it was, it won a lot of positivity and a lot of awards. So he's a fellow of the Royal College of Psychiatrists and international fellow of the American Psychiatric Association. He's a fellow of the Royal Society of Art, the Royal Society of Medicine, and a member of the Society of Apothecaries. And I didn't know this before, he was awarded the Freedom of the City of London in 2013. So he's a freeman of the City of London. That's incredible. Wow. Anyway, Deji, it's really lovely to see you. Thank you so much for joining us. And all the way from Canada. It's incredible. It's amazing, the wonders of modern technology. Anyway, how are you?
I'm very well, thank you. Thanks, Lade, and thanks. I'm reminiscing so much today that it's really unbelievable. Such a privilege to be amongst family. And yeah, I think we go back 1998.
Yep, that's right, actually. There we are, 1998, and I was only 10. Anyway, so Deji, you've done so much stuff, so many things to think about, but what's been your proudest achievement so far?
That's a difficult question, and I'm going to give answers that will probably sound like thought disorder, but I'll give them. I'll say a number of things. One, it's been incredibly proud to be a Black psychiatrist and to be Black and have the privilege and opportunity to use that Blackness to be a tool for greater good. Many people may go through life without a sense of purpose. And I think for those of us who are Black and have had opportunities and privilege, just the gift of that opportunity is a proud moment, particularly when we're able to apply that into servitude, supporting people who may not have voice, people who may require advocacy, people who may be less fortunate, and where need be, fight a good fight. So that's a sort of cradle to grave proudness. A proud moment, there may be another proud moment. What I'm probably going to do is, it's under embargo, but hopefully will be a proud moment sometime within the next few months. And I hope to be incredibly proud of that. And that should be an important proud moment. Lade, you've got that look of trying to tease it out of me. You're not going to.
Tell us. Okay, no. So we've got some things happening and we just have to wait and see what it is.
Correct.
Oh, okay. Watch this space. Deji, make sure you let us know so that we can shout it from the rooftops when it happens. Yes. Well, okay. All right. So you've mentioned some things about, being a Black psychiatrist and being so proud about that, but what barriers have you come across? And, as being a Black psychiatrist, and do you have any advice for people who are starting out on their journey?
Yeah, I'm sure. So being Black is a full-time job. And I think everything else you do is a side gig. Sorry, Femi Talabi, you may think other things are side gigs, but Black is a full-time job. And nearly every situation has the potential to have a twist or a turn, whether it's clinical, whether it's academic, whether it's in our day-to-day lives, the communities we live in. So it's a full-time job, and I would say it also presents an opportunity for us not to walk alone. My advice would be that for each of us that walks through this Black journey through life as our full-time gig, not to walk it alone. Find people that you trust and respect, value their judgment. There are enough Black receptors for everyone. So a person may mentor you academically, another may provide pastoral support. Another person may just help you stay cool in your Black. Another may keep you very grounded with your Africanness, so you don't forget how to speak Yoruba or something like that. And I would say just continue to encourage people, link up, don't distance from people of color in the workplace and so on. You'd be surprised what a Black porter can do to support you within a hospital system, or Black cleaner, nurse, in a way that you may not even predict or foresee. I work currently in an incredibly white city. And if I've ever forgotten I was Black, I've been reminded very many times here in Canada. So the advice would be, don't walk alone. Identify other people of color, other Black people that you respect, identify with. In these relationships, go vertical, go lateral. So look up, who are those that you may respect and regard that are senior to you with other lived experience and wisdom, but also not forget to go down. The whole process of reverse mentorship can be amazing fun. None of us are going to be fresh and dynamic and current forever. And just having people sort of nibbling away at our toes or looking up to us and giving us purpose and the respect for what we do, and also laterally amongst our peers.
Yeah.
So I look at this screen, there's not a single person, whether it's Femi, Raj, yourself, or David, that I've not had a private conversation with sometime about something difficult.
Yeah.
And felt very safe. And I think, apart from the psychological safety to be in these spaces, and there's a lot of talk about psychological safety every day, I would really emphasize that for people who are of color and Black, there's also a concept of identity safety. You can be in a safe workplace and feel okay there. The Royal College may be doing great things, but are you at your most comfortable with your identity and your Blackness in this particular context? And if not, why not?
Profound words there, Deji, profound words. So, who's been the biggest influence in your life and why? How have they shaped your journey so far?
Okay, if this was Oscars, I'd like to thank this and that and that and that, but it's not an Oscars award ceremony. So I'd say a number of people, and I'm going to pair two people because they have always been a pair. And I say this extremely authentically. My mum and dad would be at the very, very top of this for several reasons. Mother first, she's departed, but mum taught us how to live, how to love, and how to depart with grace and dignity, and left us with really rich value systems, a sense of charity, given without wanting back in return, and servitude, and kindness and compassion. And those are things that are stuck forever. And I hope to take them to the grave, hopefully sharing. Dad, which is probably something I don't really talk about much, is a retired psychiatrist. And actually the opportunity to see him live his life into old age as a Black psychiatrist in Nigeria and Australia, and how he progressed well through his career, shared, and it was just so much joy. I mean, it was more mature life that I realized that Totem and Taboo by Sigmund Freud and some of those books weren't novels. I'd already gobbled them up. And Delta-9 tetrahydrocannabinol, which I could say from the age of 12, was just that thing you could say was a bit more cool than saying weed and so on. So it's been the knowledge shared and the values, and I'd put them as, well, I owe them my DNA. There are other people, the late Professor Alan German, who was actually a mortually trained psychiatrist who was then in Uganda. I'm not making any link to a movie, but he was a very dear family friend. And Alan just shared so much about a career in psychiatry and his life in Africa. And watch this space, I've got a few hours of video recording of him, audio history, including Idi Amin and his mental health care.
Yeah.
And the other person, there'll be David Barlow, who was in Melbourne, Australia, a psychiatrist from Zimbabwe, white Zimbabwean, but who had just the most amazing values to share as well. Two people I'll need to mention quickly, and I'm not going to mention names like Cade of Lithium, because I didn't know at the time. Little did I know that guy with the smelly office in Melbourne was a guy working on developing lithium. It's just now that I look back and realize, so that's what we used to stink in that office, in the lab, and so on. But more local to the UK, I must, and apologies, Prof. Ebode, for being mentioned again. Thank Professor Ebode for just being there, showing it's doable as a professor, as a person who carries with dignity, as a poet, as chief examiner, as a scholar, as a man of great humility, etc., etc., etc. And a person who has also been symbolic to me in the brown side of me rather than the black side of me will be Dinesh Bogra. Dinesh has been great as a senior colleague, dear friend for many years, and confidant as well. So there are many, many other people. It takes a village to raise a child. And of course, the Yoruba in me, to thump your chest with pride, every single finger counts and plays a role. So there are many people, and they're just some of the village members. Thank you.
Oh, thank you, Deji. That was fabulous. That was absolutely fabulous. And of course, some of the names people will know: Femi Oyebode, Dinesh Bogra, absolute stellar individuals. So you spoke about Deji spoke about, you know, so many people across the world, and our next speaker is someone who has worked all across the world, actually. So our next speaker is David Ndegwa, and not so many of you will know about all the achievements and all the things that David has done, unless you have been someone who has really been interested in cultural psychiatry and Black mental health. His name is on so many different papers, chapters. He has a philosopher's understanding and philosopher's understanding of some of the issues that might be happening. And David actually, has worked. He's lived and grew up in Kenya. He has worked in Ghana. He's worked in Kenya. He's worked from Africa. He's worked in Hackney and South London, and he has. And David, if you don't mind me saying so, David has been around for a very, very long time, and he doesn't look it, but I think he might be one of the maybe third or fourth, oldest Black psychiatrists working in the country today. He has seen so much. He's got so many stories, and without further ado, I am going to ask David to tell us a little bit about yourself, David, and tell us what has been your proudest achievement so far, bearing in mind that David has, run services, he's been clinical director of services, he's worked in forensic for a long time, he's done so much stuff. David, tell us what's been your proudest achievement so far.
Right, thank you very much for that introduction, Lade. Well, if I start off with how I came to be where I am, I was born in Kenya, as you said. I trained in Kenya, went to Ghana as an exchange student, did my medical training in Ghana, worked in Ghana, then went back to Kenya, worked in Kenya, then came to this country. And I've been here since, kind of. Like most people of those days, one always thought of going back to Africa after a period of postgraduate training in Britain, but that never happened for me for various reasons. And it's something to do with the time Kenya, what was going on in Kenya at that time. I've had lots of experiences, as you mentioned, indicated. I trained at the Maudsley and I did my SHO registrar training at the Maudsley, my senior registrar training in Birmingham with Professor Blueglass, and then my first consultant post was in Hackney and St. Bartholomew's Hospital Medical School. After that, I then came down to South London, initially with what was called the Lambeth Mental Health Trust, and then that merged with others to become the current South London and Maudsley NHS Trust. I was a clinical director in East London, the first clinical director. This is the time when trusts were very new. So I was a clinical director for learning difficulties, substance misuse, forensic psychiatry. I was a clinical director for 5 boroughs. Of course, all those boroughs have now been broken up into smaller trusts. And when I came down to South London, I was a clinical director in Lambeth and later in the new South London Multi NHS Trust, then a director of strategy, retired and then came back. And here I am doing all sorts of funny things, interesting things.
Okay, so tell us what's your proudest moment?
Given all those experiences, I've had sort of, I think working in East London was quite unique, unusual, because it was a time of great change. Forensic psychiatry was not like it is today. So I was, as I indicated, one of the first ever clinical directors in forensic psychiatry, and was also involved in something that was very unusual, the building of the current John Howard Center. In the days when psychiatrists, clinicians could actually be involved in the design of buildings. So being a project sponsor for John Howard, the original John Howard, which was a copy of the Rayside Clinic in Birmingham. Rayside Clinic was a copy of the Van de Hoeven Clinic in Eindhoven in Holland. So being involved, sitting with architects, being the project kind of boss, so that was quite an interesting thing. Also introducing various treatment and assessment interventions was quite an exciting time. In South London, I would say my biggest achievement was when I came to Lambeth. Lambeth was the biggest consumer of forensic services in the country, per capita in terms of.
I think it probably still is.
Yes, lots of people in special hospitals, medium security, low security, but bringing a large number of those people who are in the private sector, in the special hospitals, down to Lambeth, reducing the usage of the number of beds that were needed by the residents of Lambeth. That was quite, I would say, quite an interesting achievement. I was also involved in the review of mental health laws. It was chaired by Geneva Richardson when Labour Party came into power. Subsequently, in the development of the Dangerous and Severe Personality Disorder Program, and pioneered the first medium secure and community services for personality disorder, which were then funded by the government's personality disorder program. So I would say those are some of my interesting achievements, those I can remember, yes.
Wow. Poof. Mic drop, David. Well done.
Yes.
That's pretty amazing. And just for those who don't know, you go to John Howard Centre, it's this huge, big, medium secure building. It's incredible. It looks brilliant, and it's amazing to think that that's your hand in there. Actually, Dave, I hadn't realised that. That's wonderful. That's really, 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 really special thing. That's something very much to be proud of, as well as all the other stuff you did with the mental health law. And of course, Mental Health Act now is something that's very important. DSPD program. Wow, that was something. And then the personality disorder program as well. Incredible. Well done. Well done. So next question then is, as a Black psychiatrist, I mean, you've been here a long time. Yeah, I think since, since the 80s, haven't you? Is that right?
Yeah.
So what barriers have you come across? And, do you have any advice for people starting out on their journey?
I had a rather unusual background. I was born in Kenya in the days of the Mau Mau, and we had segregation in Kenya. My family was one of the first that moved into a European residential area in the early 60s, around the time Kenya became independent. So I was quite used to discrimination issues, the politics of it, and had very clear views about where I was going, that sort of thing. Of course, when I went to Ghana, that was further preparation in living outside your country. I was in Ghana for a very long time. I could have been a Ghanaian citizen if I wanted to. When I came, I was quite coming to UK wasn't a big deal for me. I mean, in terms of having difficulties in adjustment, I didn't have any. And I had very supportive system around me in terms of the first consultants that I worked for. Initially, I was on a sponsorship, but they supported me in joining the Maudsley training scheme. So
the consultants were really important in making sure that you felt at home, felt settled.
They were very important. These are the late Robert Colley and the Jim Burley. who I worked for free. And then they kind of wrote the references that then put me into the Montessori training scheme, which was a very, very difficult scheme to get into and the most competitive ones in those days. Most of the people around me are quite supportive. I think one problem I had was not knowing what I wanted very early on. So most people knew at the point when, at the stage when they were registrars, that they wanted to be child psychiatrists, etc. I liked everything. I would go to interviews and people would tell me, you know, they didn't know that I was interested in the subject, in the thing I was applying for. And I'd not done the networking, which is essential. I think to be in a position, it's very important to think very early on in your career what things you're interested in, and then to seek out people who are in that area and build the necessary network. So when it comes, for example, to interviews in the transition from registrars to senior registrar, you are known, you have the right, you know, your answer to the questions makes you sound like somebody who's brilliant and committed and who's out to go and do great things. I didn't have that. So and it took somebody, one of the consultants, to make up my mind about what I wanted, at which point I then said, well, okay, I'll settle for forensic psychiatry because it's the most challenging of the subjects. That's probably a bit of advice. But in terms of discrimination, I think, as I say, I was quite prepared for, you know, I was quite assertive in a quiet sort of way, and I'd seen the worst in Kenya in the days of segregation. So,
okay, I think there'll be a few people out there who'll be, you know, bristling at the idea that forensic psychiatry might be the most challenging subject, but there we are. But anyway, at the time, people at the time, you know, disclaimer, I didn't say that, David said it. Anyway, so then you touched on this, and you know, I'm very interested in the fact that because you were already so used to segregation and the discrimination that's inherent in that you were able to, you know, you were adapted to it already. So, you know, it wasn't such a big deal for you. But at the same time, you said you really did value the support of people like Jim Burley. But who would you say has been the biggest influence in your life, and, you know, and why, and how have they shaped your journey?
Naturally, my parents. I think my parents were very much into, politically, we were very much in sync. We were very much into sort of doing things. And what you might describe as, in the Cold War days, the socialist or communist sort of types. And they're very kind of principled, weren't involved in a whole lot of things that were going on in the country. And I really admired them. And then in joining the profession, joining psychiatry, as I indicated, Robert Cowley and Jim Burley, then there were others like Griffith Edwards. There was Professor Blueglass up in Birmingham, Paul Bowden. There were quite a few people that were very, I found them very supportive in most of my dealings, interactions with them.
Okay, all right then. Thank you very much indeed. So we've heard some really fascinating insights into the lives of our three panelists and how they have come to be where they are today. You know, their journeys have been varied, some more, you know, some harder than others, and I think that says something about you know, what your experience has been before. Also something about your, you know, individual temperament and how you respond to some of the, frankly, quite inevitable adversity that may occur around you. And also the importance of being supported, actually, and being valued in your work. So we've got 20 minutes, and I have to say we do have a hard stop. It may well be that at 5 o'clock we'll all be chucked out of the room. We're all chucked out of the room, unfortunately. So we're all having the same experience with that one. So we'll try and get, you know, answers to these questions before that happens. So we've got our three panelists here, and there's the first question from Ambrose Nwachukwu, who said, do we think that racism has been well addressed within the medical world? After all, this issue of differential attainment still stares us in the face. So who'd like to start with that one?
I will.
Deji, I was going to say, did you want to say something about that?
Yeah, so the short answer, and then I'll elaborate briefly. So has racism been addressed within the medical world? Bold capital letters underlined, and I'm looking for the largest fonts. No. There's so much about it to be done. The knowledge around racism is very, very poor, and the vocabulary around racism is inadequate at the moment. Those who have the voice to talk about racism may not have the right audience or the positions of influence and power and so on. And the tutoring of those who deal with racism, you know, the doctor being called the N-word at work, or the person going through awful experiences in and out of work. There's still not enough to even mentor and support people through these experiences. The vocabulary we use, you know, we've got terms like microaggression, you know, micro trauma. Who's micro? Micro for who? And who owns that vocabulary? So there's a lot more to be done. And I think our scholarship around racism needs to start shifting. It's interesting, I'll zip after this because my colleagues probably have a lot more to say as well, that a number of us are looking at the neuroscience of racism. And when you look at some of these experiences through functional MRIs and so on, and what it does to the amygdala and the embodied experiences, you know, each of us is going through, has been traumatized in one way or another. Each of us has residual effects. Each of us has a whole pile of things, and we need to move away from the sort of reductionist simplicity of, oh, racism isn't good, we should give people equal opportunities and so on. No, there's a lot more. And I would say anti-racism, anti-Black racism of contemporary times needs to be turbo-powered with scholarship. It's not just simple, you know, it's not nice to be racist. We have a zero tolerance policy, yeah. Or, you know, the fairly trope EDI or EDIIA, or whatever my ancestors saw when they made me DEJI, diversity, equity, justice, and inclusion. Thank you.
Okay, I love that. I have to totally agree with you. You know, there's more and more evidence that that racism and discrimination has very negative effects on people's physical and mental health. And that only, you know, if you care about nothing else, that just costs. It costs in every single way, actually, across, you know, our personal lives, social lives, our educational lives, you know, and economically it costs too as well. David, Femi, David, do you have anything that you'd like to add?
Just to support that, but at the same time, so that things are changing. I mean, we are in a scenario where people are actually discussing these things in a way that perhaps weren't doing 20 years ago, 30 years ago. One is amused by the current culture wars, if you like, you know, whether institutional racism exists or not, and critical race theory, and how the various politicians of the day have taken sides. But I think we still need to have more people of color in the profession, either, and also in training, more opportunities to actually get into the training you know, institutions, you know, O levels, A levels, going into university, going to medical school, and afterwards, you know, getting a career that one enjoys. I mean, there are issues about numbers, there are issues about the personal experiences, negative experiences, often at all those stages in one's life, and how to address them, I think is something that we should always continue to try to engage with. I mean, there is the issue of trauma, and the fact that, you know, a lot of things around us are traumatizing or re-traumatizing us, and we are talking of whatever one thinks about how people identify themselves. We don't always have a victim kind of identity, but that doesn't, the fact that we don't always shout about, that doesn't mean that things around us, the history, what you see in the diaspora, does not affect us. We are shaped by the experience, and those are, there are many negative experiences all around us, and that makes us aware, aroused in a particular, which is unusual. And I think it's fair to say that a lot of Black people particularly live very unusual lives compared with the majority sort of population. And they're kind of alienated from some of the preoccupations of the majority population. They're not they're not empowered, they're not integrated into, what is around us. So we're very much outsiders. And it's a constant struggle, to use an old thing that people used to use in South Africa in the days of the liberation struggles. A luta continua, the struggle continues. I think that's probably the best. You're in a constant struggle and you're looking for new, interesting, effective approaches, interventions, ways of continuing this struggle.
Yeah, I think that's what you say is very pertinent. I mean, I was born in Manchester in the UK, and I think you're right. Actually, Black people, we live unusual lives. Actually, definitely. So, Femi, I'm actually going to move on to our next question, if that's all right, because I want to try and we've got quite a few questions coming in. And there's a question from Nina Mukherjee, and Nina says, "What's your opinion of the UK recruiting healthcare staff from Africa and South Asia, which is more pillaging of resources? This is human resources. And secondly, what about the treatment of these IMGs?" And it has to be said that Britain has, failed to fund enough places for medicine. We know that that's been a chronic problem. And although there's been an increase in the number of medical students, we do know that we are probably, I think I heard the other day that it's at least a few thousand down, and there probably needs to be another, quite a few new medical schools to accommodate those. But, it costs £500,000 minimum to train a doctor in the UK. And it looks like maybe that cost is being allowed to be borne by other countries. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, so I think this is a difficult one because Nigerian. I was born in Nigeria. I trained in Nigeria, and then I moved here as a doctor. So I would say that on the one hand, definitely there's something to be said about the fact that the net movement of health workers from sub-Saharan Africa and Asia is a net negative to those countries. For example, in Nigeria now, there are many specialists that have moved for greener pastures, so to say, and you can feel the shortage in the country. So that's something I want to say. But the other hand, I also understand that there are also many push factors that sort of like push healthcare professionals to leave sub-Saharan Africa and Asia. I know for example, like in my own case, I wanted to train as an old age psychiatrist, but the training is not that developed in Nigeria. But I just thought to myself that if I moved there, then I would have access to like the world-class training, so to say. And then there are also other factors like pay, like working conditions. And I think it's a very complex subject. It's a very, very complex subject, I must say. And I think recently, I don't know if anyone saw the BBC story about the fact that some doctors who are being abused by private hospitals.
Yeah.
I think it was on the BBC, and then they were working in human hours and things like that. And I don't think that's right. And I'm glad that light has been shown, and hopefully things will improve. But as regarding like Britain pillaging, I think there are many factors to consider, and it's a very difficult, I would say it's a very complex and very difficult subject to really take a particular stand on. I feel that there are many, it's not just a black or white thing, but there are many shades of gray. And there are many things that motivate people to either leave their countries or like push them out of their countries. Yeah.
Okay, yeah, it's definitely a hard one, isn't it, actually? David, your thoughts?
Yes, I think this is a complex one, and I agree with what you just said. Well, countries differ. I mean, if you take Kenya, which I probably know more about, post-Brexit, the British government has sort of said they would like to recruit 25,000 nurses from Kenya. Kenya actually overproduces nurses. Some you could say probably doctors. I'm not so sure, but post-independence, there was a huge investment in science, engineering, and medicine. And unfortunately, the experiences of most graduates in these areas have been very negative. So there are a lot of people moving out of Kenya to the extent that the country has changed its foreign policy. So that it's, for example, its missions abroad should be welfare organization, turned into welfare services for the Kenyans who are in the diaspora. And remittances back to Kenya are quite a significant part of the Kenyan economy. So actually the government is encouraging it. Graduate unemployment is a very big problem. There are a lot of unemployed nurses or unhappy nurses who want to go to all sorts of places, other African countries, America, the Middle East, etc. So I think a country like Britain is tapping into an existing market. And I won't sort of see it as a malevolent sort of exercise, not people going out there and sort of grabbing people who could be otherwise employed doing better things in their countries. I think African governments have a lot to answer for this. I mean, they've been very bad in the way they've treated professionals, of valued professionals, appear not to value professionals. And actually, in a lot of countries, people don't think very much in terms of staying. You know, they want to, people have been disillusioned by politics. They want to help themselves as individuals and their families. And part of that is improving their welfare. And they only see, they see the outside world as the only place they can do that in. So it's a difficult one. As I say, I don't know much about the other countries, but I can see a lot of people in Africa wanting to come to work in Europe, to work in Britain. In Kenya, the only thing that is stopping people is, I think, the first, they created a sort of an exam for sort of care staff and people like nurses. And I don't think the pass rate was very good. It was a bit disappointing, but they're still working on it. There really are large numbers of people coming in. And, this is not, as some people have said, this is not what was expected post-Brexit, but actually migration from the Commonwealth is going to, of professionals and skilled labor is going to be a very big thing in the next few years.
Okay. Deji, what do you think?
I'll keep it short in the interest of time. If these international medical graduates weren't quality and value, you wouldn't make or invite them to care for your loved ones and family. There's nothing more graceful and precious than human life. And the fact that 1,248 Nigerian doctors, for instance, were recruited last year and year on year just means it's also a quality mark, whether you like it or not. It's because they're good enough. Is it good for Nigeria? Certainly no. It's brain drain. Are there some international medical graduates contributing to brain gain? Yes. I could rattle off a few names. I know colleagues, perhaps even online now, developing mental health services within Nigeria and taking it to a benchmark level that may not even be achieved in some parts of the UK. I mean, we have colleagues developing, if you look at the social terms, SDGs, you've got colleagues developing mental health centers that use solar panels and not regular programs. We have people modifying programs to better suit African needs and so on. And if we're going to learn anything from the Philippines, a few years ago, the Philippines GDP, 10% of the Philippines GDP is from health professionals remitting money home. So there's potential. Whether they're pillaging, the way it's going, the NHS and health services are going to be black and brown. You watch.
Wow. Okay, so listen, we have only got a few minutes left, and there are quite a few questions. I'm just going to tell people out there, I'm sorry we're not going to get through all the questions, but there's a question here that I really want our panelists to answer, because I think it's really important. And it's a question from Ambrose again, actually. It's about intergenerational trauma. Intergenerational trauma is a huge concept that's not taught very much in psychiatry. How can we, and actually should we be, and how can we integrate this into the medical curriculum? So I'm going to start with you, Deji, actually, and then we'll go to Femi and then David.
Intergenerational trauma is real. And it depends. Again, I think we can come up with different names and scholarship for this. If you've been through a lot of difficult times, for instance, as a parent, you're going to raise your kids based on your own lived experience. The whole idea of Black parents giving their child the talk, or as we've shared with many colleagues who may have different backgrounds, about anytime a Black parent hasn't seen their kid and the child hasn't turned up at home, they're anxious that hopefully some harm hasn't happened to the child, is intergenerational. Apart from the embodied lived experience of trauma and so on. So there's a whole lot about it, and we're getting to that space where epigenetics is real. If you go through this for a whole generation, then with epigenetic changes, something's going to happen the way the next generation hooks up. I'm keeping it short in the interest of time, but there's a lot more scholarship to be developed there, and watch this space. It's getting exciting.
Yeah, you know, I really think we need another webinar just on that in itself, actually, don't we? Okay, Femi, tell us, what do you think? What are your thoughts?
Yeah, so I think it's a very important topic to actually discuss, especially among people of color, so to say. And of course, we know about the concept of syndemics that sort of like merges the intergenerational trauma, like attainment, and then leads to the negative outcomes that we see, especially among, like, say, Black people and other people of color. So I think as a psychiatrist, it's something to be mindful of. It should be mindful of, rather. And I feel that as a Black psychiatrist, we can actually, like, even advocate for some of our patients that we feel that might be undergoing, or that might have experienced like intergenerational trauma, so to say. So I think there's still a lot of work to be done, but I'm glad that we are, like, discussing it, and I feel that we've made, like, some progress, but we can still make more progress.
Okay, lovely. David.
I think there's a lot of work to do in this area. There is the whole understanding of, for example, slavery, and the psychological effects, short-term, long-term, of slavery, and of those people whose descendants were slaves. There is the issue around migration, recent migration, older migration, and the effect of the racism that one encounters once they arrive in UK, or once they are born in a country like the UK. And I think the models of trauma that have been around, post-traumatic stress disorder, for example, are inadequate for this. And perhaps people have forgotten that even PTSD, post-traumatic stress disorder, is a very new concept starting post-Vietnam. I think we need a new way, a new language, a new way of articulating the psychological effects of what we are talking about. And maybe at the end of the day, we'll not be talking about something called trauma. I will be talking about identity, perhaps, the complexity of our identity, the fact that our identity is always a work in progress, and how at various points we've been vulnerable, and also bits of resilience that we've acquired along the way, and how we got to be who we are, and what we want, where we want to go to. So I think understanding it, labeling it, having the science around it, and appreciate, and noting how we've come to be who we are. It's something that has yet to be done. And I agree, trauma is a very big subject. Okay, so we are going to have to finish. You literally have 10 seconds to answer this very, very long question from Ifeomeneye Akogu. And I'm just going to ask you very, very quickly. I'm going to praise it and say, what do you think about this whole concept of Black History Month and celebration? Is there any point? Okay, Femi.
Yeah, one word, absolutely. I think it's quite important to celebrate our heritage and our culture, and to also inspire younger people like myself.
Okay, all right, Deji.
365 days a year.
Yeah, that's right. We are living this, actually, that's true. David.
Yes, there's an interesting American import, but we're actually working locally in having the activities of the October month, which is when it's celebrated throughout the year, rather than just something for 1 month of the year. I think there are a lot of dimensions in it, and all positive. I think people feel very different after having gone through the month of October and being involved in these activities, and they feel very positive about it. So I think it's something to be to be made into a daily sort of all year round sort of activity.
Yeah, I think so. 365 days a year. Let's celebrate being Black.
Yes.
I'd like to say thank you so much from the bottom of my heart, actually, to our panelists who've come all the way from all over the world, many different places, and today are still all over the world. Deji, thank you very much for joining us from Canada. Femi, thank you so much for sharing your insights, and we wish you so well. We're rooting for you and your company and you know one day you'll be the great psychiatrist inspiring everybody else. And David, thank you very much indeed. You know, your wisdom is incredible, and I hope we're going to hear from you a lot more soon, and the people know who you are. And thank you to all of you for listening. There were 165 of you out there who were listening to this and sharing your thoughts. Thank you, and sharing your questions. And we wish you very, very well for this evening and for the next 364 days. Okay, thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thanks.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye-bye.